Welcome, y'all. It is good to see everyone on this Wednesday. Greetings, those of you with us on Zoom and those of you trickling in at the moment. Good to see everyone. Here we are. Here we are on our second installment of the Nietzsche documentary, which I should have. Oh, you know what? Let's see here. I don't think I put a link to it on Canvas. I really should have. I wonder if it's going to be in my history. Anyone think that it might be? I know, but that would require, there it is. Thank you. That would require me to search for my YouTube channel. We are on our second installment. I like this Nietzsche documentary a lot. I think it's good stuff. We got up through this point right there, the 30-minute mark, more or less. And so we're going to continue today. We're going to continue today with what we were doing last class, and that is we're gonna watch this documentary in 15-minute intervals, and then when we get past 15 more minutes, I will hit the pause button and talk. Okay, so if y'all have questions, please don't be shy. And also, do you like the video so far? Do you like the documentary so far? Have you learned anything? Yes, ma'am.
I thought it was interesting that about the same time that God and his theological
Yeah.
that was on Easter Sunday. And we watched the documentary on Easter Monday.
I didn't think about that. That's nice. I like that. Never thought about that. Yeah. So I hope that you have noticed that. I hope that you've noticed that Nietzsche is one of the most vehemently atheistic philosophers in the history of the Western world, and yet his thought rests on this incredibly rich theological and Christian foundation. What was his dad again? A Lutheran minister. You got that question right on the final exam. Good. So yeah, it's kind of like it's hard to get away from Christianity. Even if you're an atheist, your thought forms are still conditioned by Christianity. It's as if Christianity is still setting the terms for your thinking. Something to be aware of.
His writing also reminds me a lot of Robert Frost.
His
style of detail.
Yeah, his right. He's a very literary writer, unlike Aristotle. Plato might be, although, I mean, yeah, that's right. Yeah, but I love the way that Nietzsche writes. Very good. Descartes, not so much, right? Who would you rather read, Descartes or Nietzsche? Nietzsche. That's exactly right. Good. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts about that Nietzsche documentary? I'll just say one thing before I hit the play button, and that is that if you think about Descartes, and we didn't say everything about Descartes, we only spent 4 short weeks on him, but like even when Descartes was writing not the Meditations on First Philosophy that we read, but the other work in that book called The Discourse on Method, he begins that whole thing by talking about how he was doing this thought experiment on a cold night in the Netherlands, and it was a very abstract sort of thought experiment. Nietzsche is literally like hiking in the mountains. Are you with me? Nietzsche is, some people call him the father of existentialism. Why? It's because he's doing his philosophy with passion. It's as if his life is on the line. With Descartes, you might think of Descartes more like an armchair philosopher. It's all just theory. And I think that Nietzsche reminds us that sometimes theory can be bullshit. Nietzsche has his life on the line. He's not just playing some theoretical game here. He's trying to figure out what's true, and he's doing it with passion. I would say Descartes is not doing it with passion. I'm not trying to throw Descartes under the bus. We all have our own gifts, and certainly Descartes has things to offer. But I just think that Nietzsche is very interesting and refreshing in this regard. Make sense? All right.
Is it possible that a lot of philosophers were very depressed?
Is it possible that,
as human beings?
that many philosophers were depressed?
And actually, because depressed people think a lot more philosophically, I feel like,
Yeah.
in terms because they have more definition of meaning to life.
Yeah. They struggle. They're forced to ask difficult, they're forced to grapple and struggle. I like that a lot. The answer is yes. However, I would like to substitute a different word. I'm not trying to reject your word, but here's an,
just like I'm thinking broad.
I want to supplement your word depression with another term, and that is the term melancholy.
Yes,
Melancholy is sort of it's an older version of what we tend to mean by depression, but it also, it's not synonymous with depression. There's overlap, there's semantic overlap in meaning. I think that you understand what I mean. You could draw Venn diagrams, right? Between the meaning, the semantic range would be like the fancy schmancy way of saying it. The semantic range or the meaning of the two terms melancholy and depression. Like if, let's just imagine that this is the semantic range of the word, of what modern people, this is a very contemporary term, depression. But then here's melancholy, which, you know, most people don't use that word. I'll bet you haven't used the word melancholy in the last 5 years. I bet many of you have never used it. Some of you have, but some of you haven't. The word depression is much more common. So this is an old, dusty word. This is a more contemporary word. And they don't mean the same thing. For example, one of the things that melancholy means, and this I think gets to Rachel's point, is that it tends to include creativity. Creativity. The idea is that a melancholy person tends to be more creative. Whereas, do you normally think of a depressed person as being creative? I don't think so. Not ordinarily. So they don't mean the same thing, and yet there is a lot of overlap, isn't there? Maybe. Very good. Anything else? Any other comments about the Nietzsche documentary before I go on? I just want to say before I call on Sergio that, again, a big part of what philosophy is about is attending to the meaning of terms or words or language, the way we use language in the world. And again, words have a history. You can't understand really, you can't philosophize about depression unless you understand that it comes from and is connected to and maybe grows out of and evolves from melancholy. And yet they don't mean the same thing, do they? And so if you were to like write even a psychology PhD dissertation on depression, depending on what school you're coming from, but it's quite likely that you would want to, and there are very good books about this. In fact, I have one that I would recommend. I'm not going to talk about it right now because I don't have time. But if you were to write a PhD psychology dissertation on depression, depending on what school you're coming from, you might want to talk about melancholy. Well, guess what? In order to understand melancholy, you might need to talk about this other really, really old word that you've never heard of probably, called excedia, which is a very similar. It's what monks used to talk about. The monks, like as far back as like the 5th century, used to, you know how monks pray a lot? They pray a lot. They pray at 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. and noon and then 3 p.m. and then 6 p.m. like 9 times. And then they do a lot of gardening. Well, the monks would complain that right around 3 p.m. they would have this, they would feel like crap. they'd just feel blah. Maybe they felt bloated, or maybe they got really tired. Have you ever noticed that maybe sometimes right around after lunchtime, maybe your food has settled, maybe it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, you're in a class and you're like, I am so tired. Well, they would talk about this, and they would often talk about how the noonday demon would afflict them. And this is how they would talk about the word exediate. What's the point? The point is, philosophy is largely about attending to our language, paying attention to the words we use, and realizing that those words have a history. They come from somewhere. The fancy philosophical way to say it is that they are historically conditioned. Human language is not like mathematics. Mathematics is precise. The fancy philosophical way of saying that is that it is univocal. It's univocal, meaning that it has only one voice. Univocal, univocal, voice. Univocal means it doesn't have two meanings. It only has one meaning. When the psalm says that the Lord has a mighty arm, that's not univocal language, it's metaphorical language. So it has more than one meaning. It has a literal meaning, but then it also has this other divine meaning. The point is that human language is not like mathematics. Mathematics is precise, it's univocal, it's airtight. But human language is not like that. And so one of the jobs of philosophy, at least in my opinion, is to pay attention, to attend to the words we use, and to realize that those words have a history. There's all sorts of stuff packed into the words we use. Anyway, good. Sergio. Hope? There is overlap because they're both emotions. Mm. Mm. Nice. Yeah. Yes. Well, I'm going to write a word on the board. Yes, it is melancholy. It's also this. Nostalgia. I don't know what it is in Spanish. Okay. Yeah. But again, when we use the word depression, I don't think we're thinking about nostalgia. Nostalgia is both sad and happy or something like that. And therefore, melancholy does have a component of something pleasurable in it. I agree. Depression, I don't think it does. I think it's just like, yeah. All right. Michael, did you want to say something? Nice. Okay, y'all, we're going to watch the Nietzsche video. I'm going to set my iPhone timer for 15 minutes, and then we will hit the pause button, and I might say a few words, okay? But I need to pause the recording first. Pause recording. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I invite you to pick up with the Nietzsche documentary that you can find in the show notes below, from the 30-minute mark to the 45-minute mark. It's like a time machine. There isn't any sound. Thanks, Caitlin. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah, so one of the things that the documentary talks about is a book that Nietzsche wrote called Thus Spake Zarathustra. Thus Spake Zarathustra. By the way, quick side note, Zarathustra is one of the ways to name an ancient Eastern deity named Zoroaster. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Zoroaster, like Zoroastrianism. I think that the way you say that in German is Zarathustra. So Nietzsche gives this character in the book he wrote the name Zarathustra. And one of the things that I wanted to mention, because I found it so interesting, is that if you were listening to the description of that, of the book, of the story, of the plot, I wish I could make this big. Oh, well. Zarathustra descends down into the depths. So he's living on a mountain, and what they said is that he's in search of an audience. I just want to say that, like, if you think about, we didn't read Plato's Allegory of the Cave in this class, although every semester I kind of sort of want to and debate, should we? I didn't. But in Plato's Allegory of the Cave, the philosopher breaks free from the shadows and the illusory realm of the cave. It'd be kind of like Neo breaking out of the Matrix, if you've ever seen the Matrix. But then in the allegory of Plato's cave, he comes back. He descends back down into the cave. Why? To rescue the other poor souls that are imprisoned and in bondage in the cave. That's exactly what Zarathustra is doing when he descends down from the mountain in search of an audience. He's wanting to liberate others and bring them into the enlightenment that he himself has experienced. Okay? I just think that's interesting. Now, let's talk about this term, the Übermensch in German. Let me hear you say Übermensch. Yay. In English, it usually gets translated either as Superman or Overman. Yeah, so it's connected to the idea of will to power. It's just this idea that what it means to be truly free, what it means to be truly alive, what it means to be truly, did I say wise, or liberated, or fully human, is to be kind of a superhuman type figure, to get rid of all weakness in your life. Now, obviously, I'm a Christian, so I kind of think this is a bunch of BS. Like, I don't, like St. Paul says, my power is made perfect in weakness. And the Christian faith says that we don't embrace strength. We actually humble ourselves and serve others. But, you know, Nietzsche wasn't a Christian, and he actually hated that stuff. But his phrase, his category, Übermensch, is a big part of his overall philosophy. It is connected to the will to power that we'll talk about in a moment, I hope, when we get to Schopenhauer, okay? Nietzsche's sister, Elizabeth, basically took some of his last writings. I think you already know that he sort of went insane. He sort of had a psychic break. That's whenever he saw that horse, and he felt compassion on the horse because it fell over and died. Very ironic, as the woman points out, very ironic that a philosopher who hates pity, his last conscious act was to show pity for a creature. That would make a good philosophy paper, I think. But Nietzsche's sister, after Nietzsche sort of began to lose his sanity, co-opted some of his writings that he had written after he lost his mind and sort of repackaged them and tried to style Nietzsche as a pro-Nazi. Was he a pro-Nazi? No, I don't think so. And yet, do some of his ideas lend themselves to the sorts of cruelty and, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, horror of the final solution? Yes, I think that they do. I think that they do. And yet, I don't think it's fair to say that Nietzsche was a Nazi. That was more of a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of a move or a sort of a creation on the part of his sister Elizabeth. Okay. Nietzsche does talk about the need to find a new morality for a post-Christian world, a new morality beyond what I call Christian virtue. I wish we would have talked more about this word in this class. Did we talk about the 4 cardinal virtues? I don't think we did. We did? Good. Courage, justice, moderation, and prudence. Those are the 4 cardinal virtues, according to Aristotle. And then there's 3 theological virtues, faith, hope, and love. But Nietzsche said, that's all BS. That's all obsolete. No one believes in that stuff anymore. So we need a new morality. But the weird thing is that, like one of those commentators said, Nietzsche was really good at like debunking the old stuff. But when it came to actually putting something in its place, he wasn't able to do that. Kind of interesting. He tries, he says, what is good? Will to power. What is bad? Weakness and pity. But as that one commentator says, I forgot his name, the guy speaking with a British accent, I can't think of his name. Nietzsche sort of ended up in a cul-de-sac. He wasn't really able to offer, he wasn't really able to put anything in the place of that which he destroyed. Maybe philosophy's job is to destroy stuff, but it's not actually able to reconstruct stuff. Maybe philosophy destroys stuff, but then you need something else like theology to put something in its place. Maybe. That again would be a good paper topic. Maybe next semester. Okay, any questions, comments? If not, I would like to watch 15 more minutes, and then we'll probably have maybe 5 minutes of discussion, then we'll call it a day. Yes, ma'am. I'm deaf, sorry. Absolutely, I would. And in fact, the question is, would I consider Zarathustra to be like an Übermensch? And absolutely. And that's not really even a matter of interpretation. I mean, if you were to read Thus Spake Zarathustra, and I'd be more than happy to loan you my copy. To be honest, it is one of the top 3 most pleasurable books I've ever read. And absolutely, there's lots of things in the story that make it clear that Nietzsche is wanting you to think that Zarathustra is the paradigmatic example of what he calls the Übermensch. Yes. He's not violent. He doesn't, it's not like he rapes people, like, and thank God. So, but yes, he is someone who just embraces power. Yes, ma'am.
So would that be like in place of God, either have you like kind of destroyed all of that stuff?
I think so, but I think that what the British gentleman was maybe suggesting is that it's not ultimately compelling, and maybe even in Nietzsche's own case, maybe as demonstrated by Nietzsche's own life, the fact that he ultimately despaired and lost his mind, that might be maybe not an indication that what he tried to prop up in place of that which he destroyed was insufficient. But I would like to say something in response to your comment, and that is, and again, I love Nietzsche, right? But so you remember how I made the point earlier in the semester that Aristotle, who lived in a pre-modern world, a world where people did sort of believe in God and they weren't just secular like we tend to be. You remember how I talked about the unmoved mover and thought thinking itself and the recursive thing? And there was something about the recursive thing that for Aristotle makes science possible. It's kind of like the foundation of all knowledge and meaning. Do you remember that? But it was the recursive thing that did that. And then we leapt forward to Descartes, and I said, oh, look, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. It's the same thing. It's thought thinking itself all over again. It's the recursive thing. But isn't it interesting how what for Aristotle was in the mind of God, for Descartes is now in the mind of man, or the human being. That's exactly right. Well, I think that that's similar here, right? I mean, what I hear you suggesting, and you're right, is that Nietzsche knocked down God and tried to prop up Übermensch, man, the ultimate human being, in its place. That's a big theme. I think that that's a big theme in my intro to philosophy class, is that in the pre-modern world, or let me think, yeah, in the pre-modern world, God is sort of the center of all meaning and reality. But then in the modern world, the postmodern world, certainly our world, who needs God? It's all about the human being. Yeah, good, I like it. Yes? Well, I'm not sure that those are different. I think that those are the same. Yeah, so in other words, he's not trying, the ideal man, but that's still the human. Good. So maybe he's redefining the divine in terms of the human. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Transcending humanity. Transcending what is considered normal, absolutely. And I want to say two quick things about that. One is that maybe you've heard of transhumanism. So transhumanism is a very contemporary movement that resonates with this, some. But then the other thing that I wanted to say is, here's the deal about that. I love the fact that you're saying that. But what I very passionately would want to argue against this woman who's younger. I don't know what to say about her. She's younger. She's kind of cute. I don't know what to say about her. But she says that Nietzsche is the first one to sort of talk this way, this first one to philosophize in favor of human self-transcendence. She said that, human, and this is what I hear you saying, and you're right, I love it. Human self-transcendence. This idea that human beings can make themselves. That, it's not just kind of like, be all you can be. It's more like human beings have this divine power to recreate ourselves as something astonishing. Nietzsche is not the first person to say that. In fact, that is a Christian idea, I would argue. I mean, Jesus at one point looks at a bunch of people and says, you are gods. And he's quoting the Psalms. And Christians have always believed in something called deification. This tends to be an Eastern Orthodox thing, but when I say Eastern Orthodox, I'm talking about Christians who were not prominent in the Latin-speaking West, but in places like Russia, Egypt, the Middle East. They talk about deification, or it's also called theosis. And the idea is that human beings are destined to become divine. Now, what does that mean? That's a different topic. We could talk about that. By the way, Christians in the West also believe that. Even John Calvin, a 16th century Reformed thinker, talks about our mystical union with Christ. So you see, I love that you're picking up on this. And this is one of the reasons I love Nietzsche, because he is one of these people who talks about philosophy in terms of human self-transcendence, or you might call it self-creation. I think that there's something really amazing about that. I just would insist that it's not new with Nietzsche. In fact, there's a specific person, another German thinker named Schelling, who lived about 100 years before Nietzsche, very devout Orthodox Christian, and he says the same stuff. So it's not like Nietzsche is being super innovative here. He's really just picking up stuff that his predecessors put down, and he's trying to do it in a way that doesn't acknowledge the reality of God. Whereas these other people are like, no, from the very beginning, even in the book of Genesis, when it says that God created the human being in his own image and likeness, already you see this idea that the purpose or the, and I need to slow down, that the eschatological destiny of the human race is divine. What does that word eschatology mean? It means the last things. So I can't believe I'm talking about this, but it was a good question or a good comment. The eschaton is the last thing. So the Bible starts out, in the beginning, God. That's the beginning. But the eschaton is the way that the story ends, or the destiny of the human race, the destiny of creation. And what Christians have always said about that is that the destiny or the end is God. So Nietzsche's not really saying anything new here. It's just that he's taking God out of the picture. Does that make his picture more compelling or less compelling? That's a question for you to decide. The boss? Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You might put it like this. Someone talked about form and matter earlier. I did hear that, and I thought it was awesome when I was writing the Venn diagrams. You might say this, that Nietzsche, that the matter or the material of Nietzsche's thought is very anti-Christian, but the form of it, the structure of it, is still deeply, deeply Christian. Good. I'm looking at my watch. I think we can play the video for 15 minutes and then dismiss y'all for the weekend. How does that sound? Good stuff. Very fun. I wasn't expecting it, but I loved it. All right. I'm going to pause the recording and share my screen. No, I'm not going to share my screen. Wait. Okay, y'all. Can you guys on Zoom hear me at the moment?
Yes, sir.
Yay. Okay. I've got 457. Thanks for watching that documentary. I do like Nietzsche a lot. I think that here, I want to close like this. I'm going to talk for like 5 more minutes at the most. Keep in mind that beginning on Monday, we're going to start discussing the article, the Dionysiac worldview. I'm looking forward to that. There will be questions on the final exam about that, and in particular about our discussions about it. But I want to close this documentary as we get ready to transition to the Dionysiac worldview. I want to close with a discussion of this word. And I hope that you people on Zoom can see me and see this. I want to close with the discussion of this word, nihilism, because it's been sort of a theme from the beginning of the class. And who can remind me what that word means? Yes, Ashley. Nothing. That's right. That's right. Or nothingism, right? Nihil in German means nothing. That's right. And even at the very beginning of the class, when we were talking about Heraclitus, I emphasized this notion of the blooming, buzzing confusion. I emphasized the connection of that with Genesis 1:2, that the earth was formless and void. It was chaos. Chaos is kind of like another way of saying nothing. Why? It's because there's no form. Back to one of my stock examples. This is a lot like nothing, right? Why? Why is that like nothing? It's because you can't see anything. Imagine if this is all there was. I hope you don't have a nightmare tonight. That's a blooming, buzzing confusion. It's utterly chaotic. There's nothing there. Namely, there's nothing that makes any sense. There's nothing that's real. There's nothing that you can point to. There's no beauty. There's no shape. And this is what Nietzsche thinks is real. Now, as a Christian, why do I even talk about this? I'll tell you why. It's because it's a half-truth. My view is that Christianity is a hair's breadth from nihilism. It's a hair's breadth from nihilism. Christianity, by the way, a hair's breadth from, I've never done this in an intro class before, but I'm doing it this year. This is a statement by a man named John Milbank, that Christianity is a hair's breadth from nihilism. After all, if that weren't true, Genesis 1:2 wouldn't be in the Bible. Or does anyone know how many Psalms are in the book of the Psalms? Sometimes it's called the Psalter. If you're a crusty old Anglican like I am, you can call it the Psalter or the Psalms of David. There's 150. Well, guess what, y'all? Out of those 150 Psalms, guess how many of them speak of God's salvation and God's redemption and God's goodness? 149. 149 of them. But there's one of the Psalms, Psalm 88, is utterly bleak, utterly black, utterly devoid of any kind of hope for salvation. What's up with that? Well, what's up with that is that's a reality to attend to. Now, there's also the other 149 Psalms, thanks be to God. But there's also Psalm 88. Or think about the Good Friday service. I mean, Easter just happened, and I don't assume that most of you were in church or that you're in a tradition that observes Good Friday, but Good Friday is a service that happens before Easter, and guess what? It's only sad. I mean, it's not this, oh, Jesus is alive. No. It's just, God is dead. I literally said that like in my Palm Sunday sermon, and actually it was my Good Friday sermon. I mean, on Good Friday, God is dead. Now, who is it that said God is dead famously? Nietzsche. But you see, Christianity isn't just peppy and bright and shiny, happy people holding hands. Christianity doesn't sweep the shit of reality under the rug. It looks at it. It stares at it in the face. Now, it doesn't have the last word, but there is a kind of nihilism that I think that you find in Christianity. And that's why I have a certain respect for Nietzsche. I would not allow him to teach my daughter's Sunday school, but I would want them to appreciate what he says. All right? And beginning on Monday, we will read his essay, The Dionysiac Worldview, and that's all I got for today. Thanks for hanging out with me. May the force be with you.
And also with you.
Yay. Have a great weekend. I will see you on Monday.